Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll do a lot of New Orleans Saints. And the last time this gentleman was on the program, when we were doing training camp, he broke the internet, literally broke the internet. More views on our program, on social media, on the YouTube channel than we've ever had in the history of the program. We've been around since 2012, so that's a lot of programming. Ross Jackson joins us from Locked On Saints podcast, also, again, Saints News, as well as CrestCitySports.com. Ross, welcome back. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Even better now. Glad to be back here with you.
Glad to have you back. And Ross is, as you know, a lot of people listen to the radio show with us each and every Thursday at 4:35, and of course doing a little double dipping for us today. But Ross, if you're not watching Ross's podcast, you're not keeping up what's going on with the New Orleans Saints. It's a year-round podcast. It's concise. He breaks it down for you. There's a lot of great writing with some other publications. He's going to tell us about all of it. But again, I would subscribe right now. Just stop what you're doing and subscribe right now to the podcast. Ross, tell us all about it.
Sure, yeah, the Locked On Saints podcast is it's kind of my baby at this point. It's David Locke's baby, but it's also my baby.
Right.
I've been hosting that podcast since 2018, the off season there, which was the I think my first episode was discussing the Marcus Davenport draft selection and everything, and the big trade up and all those things. And so we do it every single Monday through Friday, season in, season out, no matter what. It's 5 days a week, and in a lot of cases, like what we're doing right now, we're going twice a day. So an episode releases every morning, and then an episode every afternoon or evening that the Saints practice to make sure you're getting the most up-to-date information with everything that's going on around the Saints during and before and after all of those practices. So that's my pride and joy, and I'm grateful that we get to do it. It's available on YouTube as well as free everywhere, no charging or anything like that.
Which is great.
It's an awesome model, and available on all podcast platforms as well. And then the written work that I do mostly with Saints News Network these days and everything, but just previewing camp every day, 3 players to watch, as well as, of course, breaking down any of the smaller or maybe I kind of delve a little bit into the details a lot more. I go into the weeds on a lot of stuff, and then, of course, weekly on your radio show and with CCS Daily. So it's I consider myself very fortunate.
I want to say this, and I mentioned this to John Hendricks the other day. You guys are a dynamic duo on Saints News. I'm telling you right now, because I don't know how, look, I did training camp for years, right? And you got your notebook, and you're sweating, and you're trying to keep up with everything that's going on. You're writing your notes. And I've never seen a breakdown like John breaks it down.
Yeah, he's incredible.
I mean, and then you come back with your analysis. You got to check out Saints News as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, John, and I'll speak directly to John and say, John, you're doing a fantastic job, my man, because it really is. I mean, he and I are hip and hip all throughout practice, throughout the day, and taking notes, sharing notes, checking in with other folks, and everything like that, and making sure that we're getting the most in-depth stuff possible. Because there's a lot of what happened. We want to give the why it's happening and why it's important. We're all about making the fan a smarter fan, making it more enjoyable every day to be a Saints fan. That's our goal.
Yep, no doubt. Let's first of all start off with again, your overall thoughts of the talent level of this team this year, and maybe compare that and contrast that with last year in Dennis Allen's first year, and maybe again going back to a couple years into the Peyton era.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a wildly different team this year than you saw last year, and I think so far we've seen a wildly different Dennis Allen from what we've seen last year as well. Just a lot more comfortable. He's got a lot more of his guys around him. He's got his quarterback in Derek Carr. He's got his guy that's on his hip every day. Joe Woods, a defensive coordinator who's remarkable, has an incredible story getting to the NFL and then finally winding up here in New Orleans. He went and got guys that he's very familiar with, like Clancy Barone at tight end coach and Marcus Robertson at secondaries coach. And so when you have that many guys that are all together that you're very familiar with, it creates a way for you to feel very comfortable as a head coach. So it gives him a real opportunity to be able to be the guy again. And it's a very different Dennis Allen that we saw last year. Last year's Dennis Allen was a little bit kind of quieter, reserved, players coach type, kind of everybody's got a voice and all these other things. And I think all those things are still true. Players coach type, everybody's got a voice, but you could see him command a lot more this year and demand a lot more. He's vocal when there's a procedural penalty and somebody goes offsides or there's a false start.
Last year he wasn't, right? There were some complaints by Kamara last year. They weren't redoing plays when they were messing up, having a problem. This year it's different.
This year they're taking a lot more steps towards that, and Dennis Allen is kind of the pioneer of that, and I think Derek Carr is a bit of that too. Derek Carr's kind of made a culture of, we didn't get it right, let's do it again here in New Orleans, and so if he and Chris Olave don't connect on a route, for instance, they'll run that route 4, 5, 6, 7, however many times it takes after practice to get it right, so the next time that they do it the next day they get it, or they'll run it immediately right away and everything as the teams are changing or something like that. So you're just seeing a lot more of the not accepting anything less than perfection this year, and I think that that's a good route for them to be taking here this year. That's very different than what we've seen over the past couple.
I want to get specifics into players, but overall talent level from this year to previous years.
Yeah, I think it's improved from what we've seen last year. I think the wide receiver room this year is much better than we've seen probably in several previous years when we were talking about a lot more undrafted guys like Austin Carr, or them going out and pulling people from lacrosse leagues to join their training camps and things like that. What we're seeing right now are a lot of NFL veterans and a lot of talent. Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, those are the guys that are right at the top of that unit, but now you see more veterans, James Washington, Brian Edwards, guys that have played in the NFL, as well as guys, younger guys they brought in that are undrafted, like Shaq Davis out of South Carolina State University, one of the HBCU guys that comes in this year, as well as A.T. Perry, who they drafted in the 6th round this year. And so you're seeing just kind of this diversity, and that kind of goes well beyond the wide receiver room. That's the tight end room, which I think is one of the most improved units. The running back room vastly improved with the addition of Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. There was no second guy to Alvin Kamara last year, while Mark Ingram was dealing with injuries and things like that. So what you're seeing is the Saints kind of rebuilding their depth, which they kind of had to lose in 2020 with that dip in the salary cap that happened all across the NFL. And so they've done a really good job kind of building that up this year. And so I think that has kind of raised the floor of the talent level, but they've also improved at some of the most important positions on the field, including, of course, quarterback.
So veterans and draft picks as opposed to undrafted free agents filling out that roster.
It's going to be really hard for an undrafted free agent to make the roster this year. And look, we know that the New Orleans Saints, the guys like Taylor Stallworth and Shai Tuttle, Malcolm Roach, Carl Granderson, Juwan Johnson, who was maybe one of the steals of that 2020 undrafted free agency class. And so you know that they found success there, but it's going to be tough this year to get it done. There's a couple of guys that I would say, okay, maybe they're in that conversation, but it's going to be challenging. Maybe more practice squad UDFAs or undrafted free agents, but right now they have a lot of talent on this roster that has NFL experience, and that's going to be hard to buck.
All right, let's start with, again, the most important position, maybe not position group, but position quarterback.
For sure.
Derek Carr. How's he looked? His command of the offense, leadership with the team. What have you seen thus far?
I really like what we've seen from Derek Carr thus far. And look, he hasn't been perfect. You know, he hasn't thrown any interceptions throughout camp, which I think you love to see from your starter quarterback, right? I got somebody said something to me the other day. Why are you always talking about the interceptions that the other quarterbacks are throwing? Why are you never talking about the interceptions that Derek Carr was throwing? I said, well, that would be a boring segment. It would be 7 minutes of me just sitting there quietly because he hasn't thrown one. And so, you know, I think that, you know, he hasn't been putting the ball in harm's way. And I think the thing that's really nice about him too is that he's not only improved the offense, but he's doing things that are making the defense improve as well. I've asked several players, including today, we talked to Jonathan Abram, who is a former defensive teammate of Derek Carr in Las Vegas. And I asked him, what have you seen throughout all of your time with Derek Carr that has made things complicated for a defense? The thing that he talked about was what he does pre-snap. So Derek Carr's ability to walk up, diagnose what a defense is ready to do, and then maybe change a play or, you know, change a shift or flip a play or whatever it might be, right? Flip the protection or whatever it might be. Make the adjustments to give the offense the best look possible against that defense, meaning that the defense now goes from being in the advantage to being in the disadvantage. And so how does the defense react to that? How does the defense disguise their looks better so that that doesn't happen to them? How do they react when it does and they have to play against a disadvantageous situation? So I think that that's been challenging the defense in a way too. And I think in some ways that challenges Joe Woods, that challenges Marcus Robertson, that challenges you know, Dennis Allen, who's the defensive play caller, who maybe isn't going to change what the defense is doing, but the way that they coach the team, that the defense has to be in consideration with here's how you disguise these things and here's how you better execute. Right,
and you mentioned line calls. That's something that Breeze did. That is something that we haven't seen. Where again, really since Allen took over with the lineman making the line calls, specifically the center. Now it goes back to the quarterback. Much better scenario for the Saints having Carr making those line calls.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you love that to be in the hands and in the responsibility or purview, if you will, of the guy that is executing the offense from top to bottom, and that's the quarterback. And so having that there, although it hasn't stopped Eric McCoy. Eric McCoy every now and then will go to the line and he'll still say 58's the mic, or you know, he'll make his IDs.
And a lot of setters do that, right?
A lot of them do it, and I love it from Eric McCoy because the way that Derek Carr explained it was that like he'll go out and he'll do it, and then he'll say, and Derek Carr was kind of like, well, you know, at least he was right. You know, like he's getting it. But a lot of that, the additional pieces beyond that are shifting in terms of communication back to the quarterback spot, as opposed to a joint effort where maybe communication can get a little wonky, things like that. We saw this early on last season where whether it was Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton under center, they could not identify where pressure was going to be coming from, supplemental pressure in particular, blitzes. And so this year you're seeing a lot more of that back into the offensive, the offensive executors plan, not the play caller, but the executors plan and the quarterback. And I think that ends up helping them quite a bit.
Strengths of Derek Carr, what you've seen thus far, in terms of his ability to make all the throws.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of what his strength is that he can make all the throws. And that means, and I think sometimes when we say that a quarterback can make all the throws, what people assume we're saying is that they can throw the deep pass. That's not always the case, right? He's got to be able to not only hit different areas of the field, but he's got to be able to vary up his approach. He's got to be able to gun one in when he's got to gun one in. He's got to be able to put some touch on a pass. He's got to be able to lob a pass downfield versus a bullet downfield or something like that. So also his ability to be able to sort of change up and maybe vary up the delivery of a pass is something that you see as a part of the dynamic of what he can do as a passer. Now, he throws the ball differently than some of these other guys. His spiral's a little different, all those things. So that is actually something that he works with the receivers and the pass catchers with, so they can get a little bit used to that. But his ability to be able to vary up and say, okay, this one needs a little bit of touch. I got to drop this one in the bucket, or I've got to get that one in as quickly as possible. His ability to be able to do that while also hitting all areas of the field is a little bit more of what we're discussing when we say that, and Derek Carr absolutely has that ability.
Obviously, a quarterback matures over time. Where is he in his maturation process?
I think he's probably in a situation to where you could say that he's matured as a quarterback. Now it's about what happens when you fit him into a different system as a matured quarterback. You know, I think every player in the NFL is trying to get better every single day. You know, Cam Jordan talks about that all the time. Cam Jordan's going into year 13, and everything he's worried about is getting 1% better every day. I think Derek Carr has that as well. But I do think that he is a matured quarterback that's also still finding ways to improve. And, you know, I think the worst thing that we can do just as a people is stop trying to find ways to improve and to accept ourselves as a finished product. I think Derek Carr has done a good job of not falling into that trap and instead always working to find ways to get better. And I think that the situation that happened in Las Vegas last year probably drives that home a little bit, right? The chip on his shoulder that he's going to play with of having a franchise effectively give up on him very publicly, I think is one of those things that puts that chip on your shoulder that says, I'm going to get better, I'm going to be better, I'm going to be able to prove them wrong. And I think that's something that he's doing a good job of.
If you've noticed deficiencies in his game during this training camp, what has it been?
I think maybe there's a couple of times where maybe a pass doesn't get out of his hands the way that he wants it to. There have been situations to where he's, throwing on the move. He does have the experience and the ability to be able to extend plays, but those passes when he's extending plays that are coming off platform maybe aren't delivered with the same precision and accuracy as an on-platform throw, which isn't out of the ordinary. But I think those are the situations where maybe you could see him get into a little bit of trouble. Typically, over the course of his career, one of the things that's been a big criticism of his has been the red zone and sort of decision making there. And so I think that what you're looking at with New Orleans is what else did they do to be able to kind of deal with that? Taysom Hill's still in the building. They add Jamal Williams. You've got Alvin Kamara. They've got Juwan Johnson. They bring in Foster Moreau. Michael Thomas is healthy. Chris Olave's a stud. So now you have
Jimmy Graham.
Yes, Jimmy Graham. Yeah, of course. How could I forget? They bring back Jimmy Graham. And so you have all of these ways now to be able to produce in the red zone without necessarily asking Derek Carr to do too much. He doesn't have to create. He doesn't have to overwork. He doesn't have to try to find space or anything like that. In some cases, he doesn't even have to throw the football if you don't want him to. And there's a lot of different ways that I think that the Saints have kind of counteracted that stigma.
That's a great point, Ross, because the Saints have suffered in the red zone.
Yeah.
They made a concerted effort to upgrade, again, the weapons in red zone, and they've done that. But Derek Carr's not been devoid of weapons at Las Vegas. That's never been an issue here, there, okay? The success or lack of there has been kind of a team thing. Derek Carr, obviously the quarterback, it lands on him, but he's not coming to a place, leaving a place that was devoid of talent.
Absolutely not. I mean, that was an offense last year that averaged, I believe, was 4 more points per game than the New Orleans Saints did last year. They were in the 23 range. The Saints were at 19.4.
Except they get shut out in New Orleans, right?
Except for that one, yeah. Well, and so you imagine, maybe if they score 24 points in that game, how does it look different, right? But I do think that what you also have seen is kind of, for Derek Carr over the course of his time, he's also never had a team defense better than 20. You know what I mean? And so how much of those situations that he's either trying to march the team down the field to be able to get those game-winning drives, which he's got the most of those since 2014, which another reason why the Saints like him is calm under pressure. But outside of that, how many times has he been let down by a defense and things like that? I mean, I don't think it's probably not hard for a Saints fan to remember 2014, 15, and 16 and what it was like where you have a great quarterback but not so good, a look over on the defensive side. So I think that that's probably one of those places, too, to where you go, he wasn't devoid of weapons. You could see that as evidence last year. The Raiders arguably had a better offense than New Orleans did, except for the time that they met one another. And that game right there was probably the greatest example of what Derek Carr is inheriting when he comes here to New Orleans, which is a fantastic defense and a better offensive line.
Ross Jackson with us, Locked On Saints podcast. Ross, I'm not going to go 3 deep on the depth chart, but I am going to go 3 deep when it comes to the quarterback position.
Sure, yeah.
Because I want to get your thoughts on Jameis Winston coming back from the injury, how he has looked, accepted his role as a backup. And quietly, Jake Haener is having a really good camp. Everyone I speak to tells me, again, how impressed they are with the rookie. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, Jameis coming back to New Orleans was kind of a surprise to everybody, right? You and I were kind of looking at it like, okay, well, he's on his way out, so now what are the quarterbacks in the draft that they should be looking at and things like that? And, of course, they still go to the draft. Anyway, we're bringing in Jake Haener. But we were all very surprised when it came to Jameis Winston's decision to come back. But he's had a really how do I want to say this? His intent on coming back makes a ton of sense. He's still kind of reeling from what he himself called debilitating injuries and things like that. But he wants to be able to work with a team that accepts him. And the New Orleans Saints accept everything about Jameis Winston. They accept the ups, they accept the downs, they accept the quirkiness and the pressers and things like that. They love him, and I think the media corps really enjoys speaking to him too, which kind of helps. But I think that the way that he's kind of looking at this opportunity is that it's an opportunity to learn and grow. Kind of the same way that he looked at the opportunity of arriving in New Orleans in the first place. Remember, when he first arrived in New Orleans, he wasn't even the QB2.
Right.
He came in behind guys like Drew and Taysom and everything. And so I think that what you've seen from Jameis is basically him say, okay, this is where I am at this point in my career for now. What's the best decision for me to make to be better than that next year, better than that the year after that? And so I think that he made the decision that he feels will help him do that. And he helped the Saints out in the meanwhile, taking a bit of a pay cut, which has helped them be able to fill out the rest of this roster, right? What we've seen from him in practice so far is a lot of up and downs. He's got multiple interceptions so far throughout camp, but he's got multiple touchdowns all throughout camp too. And I think I'm pretty safe in saying he's got more touchdowns than interceptions, which great. You know what I mean?
That's Jameis Winston, all right?
Yeah, and you're also in training camp where you're making a lot of throws you probably wouldn't make it.
There you go.
You know, to give somebody an opportunity to go up there and make a play and all that. You want to get an evaluation of, hey, does this receiver have the ability to bail out a quarterback and things like that? And if you don't put him in the situation to prove that, you can't know that. And so I think that there's a little bit of that too. But I think that he's done a very good job of working with Derek Carr all throughout. So too has Jake Haener. But Jake Haener's performance has been remarkably impressive. Now Jake Haener's got a couple of interceptions as well. You know, like they come and they go. But
does he look like a rookie?
But he doesn't look like a rookie. You know what I mean? He's not throwing rookie interceptions. He's throwing veteran interceptions. And I think that there is a difference between those two.
That bodes well for the future, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you look at with Jake Haener is that if Jameis achieves his goal, which is stay in New Orleans, work to get better, work with another good quarterback, then he'll get another opportunity somewhere next year. And if that works out for him, who rises up to be the QB2? It's undeniably in Jake Haener's hands right now. And I think deservedly so. I don't think it's a default situation. He's just been massively impressive. And there's some other things too. Drew Brees was the quarterback that he grew up studying as an undersized quarterback. The New Orleans Saints offense and system is something he's very familiar with because he's watched it his entire life. He was a fan of the New Orleans Saints that entire time. He's very familiar with what it is that they do and what their philosophy is over on the offensive side. And also, Derek Carr has been his mentor for years at this point. So he and Derek Carr have the same shorthand. They talk about the game the same way. They use the same verbiage. They see the field the same way. And when you're looking at a solid QB2, I think a lot of times we take that at surface level and say, okay, who's the quarterback that can win some games if the starting quarterback gets hurt? It's also, what do you do with that starting quarterback on the sideline when the defense is on the field? And I think that's where Jake Haener and Derek Carr's relationship can help improve Derek Carr, can help improve Jake Haener moving forward.
That's what you get on the podcast. Why did I tell you? Subscribe today. Let's talk about the offensive line. This team will go as far as both their lines take them.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right now, you look at the depth chart just came out. Trevor Penning is penciled in as the left tackle. Andres Pete, James Hurst, again, either or, with Hurst probably taking the lead here with Pete out. McCoy, your center. Ruiz, your right guard. Ramczyk. And then, of course, behind Ramczyk is Norton. Behind Ruiz is Throckmorton. Behind McCoy is Garcia. Behind Hurst and Pete right now is Saliveri and Landon Young. Let's talk too deep.
Yeah.
How good is this offensive line?
The too deep offensive line is going to only be as good as the starting offensive line is. But there's a caveat to that. If James Hurst starts, which I agree, I think he's in the lead to start right now.
Kind of has to be,
in
right?
what has been a camp battle that nobody knew was coming, but a lot of people, like fans, might have been like, "Well, wait a minute, is this gonna happen?" But I do think that this is a situation where right now, especially with Andres Pete being out with injury, which you might say something like, well, if he's out with injury, how can James Hurst be in the lead when we haven't seen Andres Pete? The fact of the matter is that this is exactly why a guy like James Hurst is on the roster in the first place, is because Andres Pete has been unavailable. Over the course of the past, I think it's 3 seasons, or let's say 2 seasons, James Hurst has played in almost twice the amount of games as Andres Pete as a starter. And that's in a situation where you look at him being a guy that's coming from behind in those situations. And so he started at left tackle, he started at each of the guard positions, all that. I think that Andres Pete as a backup left guard might be the best backup left guard in the NFL. Because he's still a talented player.
Yes, he is.
You're just trying to keep him on the field. And perhaps being a backup for a little bit extends that longevity a little. So I do think that that's a thing. I think the next piece of it is that I love that the Saints brought in Max Garcia.
Me too.
And earlier on this offseason, they brought in Billy Price for the same reason. Didn't work out with Billy Price, but it's working out so far with Max Garcia. They also, by the way, added another undrafted free agent, Alex Pihlstrom, who's doing the same thing. But Max Garcia firmly ahead in terms of who's your backup center. And this is something you and I have talked about for years on the program now, is that if you have an injury at center, you have to move your right guard and Cesar Ruiz over. So and then you have to have a new right guard step in. So 2 of your positions on the offensive line get impacted by one injury. Now that you have a direct backup and a guy like Max Garcia, that goes a long way for you. It's kind of like what they found with Josh Andrews toward the latter half of last season. So clearly they saw some value in that.
Right. Talk about Trevor Penning. The question is, can he stay healthy? But the other question is, does he have the feet to play left tackle?
Yeah. I think that's part of what they're trying to learn right now is the fundamentals, the everything you're looking at in terms of his foundation, right? So we spoke with Ryan Ramczyk today, and one of the things that Ryan Ramczyk spoke about was how he spent some time off to the side working with Trevor Penning, or I guess on their own, working with Trevor Penning on things like footwork and fundamentals and hand placement and things like that. And the thing that Ryan Ramczyk, kind of agreed was true about Trevor Penning is that he's got all the skill in the world, he's got all the talent in the world, but just needs to be able to put all of it together. I think it was Luke Johnson of NOLA.com that made that observation. And that it's just about trying to piece it all together. And we've seen that before, because that was kind of the case. I don't want to make this comparison to mean more than it does, but we saw the same thing with Teron Armstead. Teron Armstead came into the NFL, had every piece that told you he was going to be an outstanding tackle in the NFL, but just needed to put it all together. And when it clicked, it clicked. Right. And so that's what you're waiting for Trevor Penning is, will it click? Right. And he's going to get a lot of opportunity throughout the rest of camp. He's going to get a lot of opportunity throughout the preseason to get to that point before week 1. I think he'll be the week 1 starter at left tackle, but what's the percentage of his effectiveness at that time is going to be what the question mark is.
Do want to ask you, you mentioned James Hurst moving in at guard, might win that job. You talked about Max Garcia. He's a guy who played multiple positions. If an injury was to happen, let's say to the tackle, let's say to Penning, what happens there? Is Hurst kicking out, or is it going to be the same thing again? They're going to be moving Pete in, kicking Hurst out at that point, so you're going to get a multiple change here on the line?
I think you'll probably still see multiple changes, unless they feel really good about where Landon Young is by the time that the season begins.
How do you feel about him?
I like what Landon Young can do at tackle. They've been working with him at guard, which I think is making his tackle game better. He's understanding his footwork a lot more. He's understanding, and I think that's one of the reasons why you see Trevor Penning working with James Hurst off to the side all the time, is to get footwork down. And they're, and it's helping Landon Young with things like spacing and pace and angles and all these other things as a tackle. So I think that actually him getting some guard experience is helping him as a tackle. But I wouldn't be in a rush to start him at guard at this point, as he's learning the new position. It's just an opportunity for them to see, hey, what else can you do? But he can play either one of those tackle spots, so I think that's helpful. And another guy that I would watch out for too is Lewis Kidd. Lewis Kidd has played the tackle spots. I don't know that you rush to put him at left tackle, the blind side, but his ability to work at right tackle maybe helps to alleviate a little bit of that responsibility for Landon Young, so it allows him to get maybe a little bit more familiar and developed as a left tackle. But it depends on who makes the 53 and who makes that initial roster about how that's going to end up shuffling.
Because you do have Storm Norton right now penciled in that right tackle position behind Ramczyk. I do want to ask you about Cesar Ruiz and his maturation process.
Yeah, it's continuing, and you can see it. He had a massive block during a run play earlier this week, earlier in camp. That I think is one of those moments where you kind of go, okay, Cesar Ruiz is in the process of arriving. I don't think he's arrived yet, but he's in the process of arriving. And I think that right now what he's trying to prove is that last year wasn't a fluke, right? The Saints didn't pick up his 5th-year option this offseason. And I don't know that that's necessarily indicative of their faith in him more than it is about how just ridiculously pricey it is to accept that 5th-year option right now. But you have to imagine that there's some evaluation process in there, because if he was head and shoulders above the expectations, you commit to the money and then you figure it out. They didn't do that. So I do think that there's some evaluation in that decision, although that's probably not the deciding factor entirely. But I think you've continued to see him, develop. He's, the defensive line has played incredibly well here throughout camp, so he's getting big-time challenges against guys like Brian Brzee, the rookie, as well as Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard, the new additions, and even Malcolm Roach, who just flashes over and over and over again. Again, also part of that early undrafted free agent class that has carried through here for the past few years. And so I think what you're seeing from Cesar Ruiz is a continued maturation, but again, we're seeing this in training camp, right? Let's see what happens when we get to on-field, full contact guys making tackles and trying to hit each other.
Nick Salvadori, the rookie, will he get playing time this year? Is he a guy that it doesn't seem like he's a plug-and-play guy right now? Seems like there needs to be some an opportunity to kind of grow as a lineman, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't look at Nick Saldivari the same way we looked at Eric McCoy when he was drafted in the second round. You know, and I know Nick Saldivari was a fourth-round draft pick, so it's probably not super surprising. But I think that there's a chance that he gets playing time if there's an injury ahead of him. But if you're not seeing number 64, it's not the end of the world either. And it's not really an evaluation of him. It's just that he's got guys ahead of him.
Yes. Overall, how do you think this line looks?
On the offensive side?
Yes.
It's a little tough. I think it's better. It's better, but it's a little tough to fully gauge right now.
Right.
You know, they're in practice. Ain't nobody really trying to hit the quarterback
more over the next
and all
2
these
weeks,
things.
right?
We'll learn a lot throughout the preseason, and we're going to get a look at the starting lineup as that first Sunday game against the Kansas City Chiefs kicked off. They're expected to play starters for about 15 snaps, I think Jeff Duncan quoted, or estimated. And so I think that when you look at that, that'll give you an opportunity to really get an idea of where they are.
And Ross, we've talked about this a lot on the radio show. The next 15 days or so are huge for this team. Obviously, you're starting against Kansas City here, but again, from there, you go to Los Angeles. You're practicing against the Chargers in a controlled scrimmage. You come back to New Orleans. You're practicing against the Houston Texans in a controlled scrimmage. Controlled practices. Those are where you really find out what you have with your team going against another team, and then of course, then the preseason is over and ready to get started here. But these, there's only one cut down now, so this is where you really want to find out what you have as a team. And these next 2 weeks, practice against another NFL club is going to be huge. Yeah,
this is massive for a lot of players on the roster, but it's really good for the offensive line to continue that conversation. What I would say is that I feel better about the offensive line at this point this year than I felt about it last year. I'm pretty comfortable saying that. But I do think that when you look at the roster as a whole, just the opportunity to hit somebody you haven't hit before, or be hit by somebody that you haven't been hit before, or block somebody that's not using the same pass rushing moves, whose repertoire and all those other things. I think that goes a long way for these guys. And preseason games, joint practices all aid big time in those opportunities.
All right, we will take a break here. When we come back, we'll talk about the wide receivers, the tight ends, and we'll move on to the defense. Ross Jackson breaking it down for us from Locked On Saints podcast, Saints News, and also CrescentCitySports.com. I am your host, Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll be right back.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Acadian Custom Shutters is locally owned and operated, specializing in interior and exterior shutters and window coverings, as well as awnings and patio covers. Acadian Custom Shutters offers American products with personal service and workmanship, serving the South Shore, North Shore, and Mississippi Gulf Coast. More information is available at 985-893-3119 or AcadianCustomShutters.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints podcast, Saints News, and also CrescentCitySports.com is our guest. We'll stay with the offense for a few more minutes, and let's talk about the pass catchers. Let's talk about the tight end position, which I think is the strongest we've ever seen in a long time with the Saints. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Jimmy Graham comes in. Taysom Hill is still a part of that group. Jesse James, the former Steeler, and Lewis Kroll, the former Pittsburgh Panther, by way of Florida Gators. Your thoughts on this position, which, wow. That's going to be a tough cut.
Yeah, it is. And they, look, they might have some decisions made for them based on injuries and things like that. Lucas Kroll right now dealing with a tailbone injury after coming down hard, trying to make a contested catch in the end zone. Jesse James dealing with a groin injury. We've seen groin injuries be pretty pesky for this team over the course of the past couple of weeks, and calf injuries as well. But I think that when you look at where the Saints tight end room is, what I used to say all the time is that it's the best that the tight end room has been since Jimmy Graham was in the building, but now Jimmy Graham's also in the building. So, but I really do like what they've done. They have a very diverse group that can do a lot of different things. You've got a good blocker, a developing blocker in Juwan Johnson, who, of course, is a fantastic pass catcher and route runner for you, the former converted wide receiver. Foster Moreau is somebody that's great as an additional pass protector to sit back and help out there when you need a max protection situation, but also very, very good seam runner, very, very good pass catcher. And he's somebody that Derek Carr has a lot of familiarity with, of course, from all their time together with the Raiders. Jimmy Graham gives you a big-time red zone threat. You've got a good set of blockers and guys like Taysom Hill who can contribute there, Lucas Kroll developing there as well. So I really like what the Saints have been able to do in terms of rebuilding this this tight end room. I think J.P. Holtz, the newest addition, kind of helps with that too. He was the guy that helped them out a lot last year when they were dealing with injuries. So it's not surprising to see him back in the building for right now too. But I think it's going to be a tough cut. It'll just be down to if they keep 3 plus Taysom or 4 plus Taysom and how they want to go about that. Do they classify sort of looking at wide receivers and tight ends as a group of pass catchers together and then maybe steal some numbers there, or do they separate those out?
Carr likes the tight end position. He utilized it. So, again, I think that was a smart move on the part of the Saints. How do they utilize Taysom this year?
How don't they? I mean, he's doing everything but being on the defense at this point. But he's doing some special teams work as a returner and coverage, all those things. But he's also he's still taking those snaps at quarterback, under center, running, throwing passes. We saw him connect actually with Foster Moreau over the middle today during team drills. We've seen him get involved big time in some pass catching opportunities as well, which is something that the Saints have been very vocal about. They want to get him more involved as a receiver in the offense. And during Wednesday's practice, when they were running some of the in-game 2-minute drill simulations, Jameis Winston connected with him on 3 of his 5 passes, and he went to him, I think it was 3 times in a row. And so you know that there's a lot of trust there between some of these guys and Taysom, and so Taysom's role is massive going into 2023 because they can effectively use him on offense however they want. Yeah,
and of course a big red zone threat as well.
Of course.
All right, wide receiver Michael Thomas, again Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave. We know those are the 3. Who's after that?
Yeah, that is the question. That is truly the question. I thought for a while it was going to be potentially Bryan Edwards to be that guy that was going to come in. He's got the most familiarity with Derek Carr. They played together in Vegas. But, look, he hasn't stood out the way that I expected him to. Now, he had a nice practice on Thursday, for sure. But all in all, I mean, we've seen him not be able to create separation, not be able to come down with contested catches, things like that. Maybe he gets back into rhythm. He spent a lot of last year hurt. Maybe that's part of it. And he gets back into rhythm here throughout the latter half of camp. But outside of that, we haven't really seen a super consistent receiver leap from, beyond the big 3, except for Traquan Smith. Traquan Smith, Keith Kirkwood, guys that have been with the team already, that understand the system, that know where to be and when to be there. Surprise, surprise, they're the ones that are doing really well throughout camp. And the Saints have not cut any corners trying to get more competition in there. They bring in Jontre Kirkland, the former LSU player that's played, tons of positions. They had him on the defensive side. They had him play quarterback against Kentucky. They've done everything with this guy. So we'll see, he's only been in camp a couple days. We'll see how his role continues to grow too. But he's a speed guy, and other things. But they bring in Lynn Bowden. They bring in Kiki Cody. They bring in all these free agents and trying to kind of continue to infuse some competition there. So eventually some folks are going to start to stand out, especially as they get a little bit more acclimated to the system, playing in games, getting a little bit more in rhythm there, and as things get a little bit more familiar, practicing to get ready for a game, which is what you do all season, we'll start to see a little bit more separation. But right now, if I had to choose 5, your top 3 in Thomas, Olave, and Shaheed, and the only 2 that I could really walk away today saying, yeah, these are the other 2 guys, are probably going to be Traquan Smith and then some combination of either A.T. Perry or Keith Kirkwood.
Is that a waiver wire look-see there, or maybe a trade to try to upgrade that at the end of camp?
I think maybe a waiver wire situation. position. And then if things look dire after that, then maybe a trade, and if you have an injury there in particular. But I think that they're in a position here to where they can wait and see how the waiver wire goes at a few different positions and see if maybe they want to get in on how they adjust beyond the initial 53-man roster.
Alvin Kamara out for first three games, not really utilized like he should have been out the backfield in terms of catching the ball. That seems to be a different situation with Derek Carr as quarterback now. But let's talk about, again, the guys behind him, Jamal Williams, Kendrick Miller. They have Merriweather. They brought in Hunt. Hunt is not signed with either the Saints nor the Colts. He went to visit the Colts after that. Right when you look at that running back position right now, you hope you don't have to get down to the fourth guy. Right. But you probably have to find a fourth guy. Yeah. So let's talk. Tell me about what you've seen out of these backs so far and who may be that fourth guy.
Yeah, so I think if we go beyond Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller, we're looking at Kirk Merritt, who's the converted wide receiver. True. So if you're looking for a pass-catching running back,
what better? I mentioned on the radio show, could probably do the skill set of a Deebo Samuel if you wanted to utilize him like that. Same measurables, not the guy, but has that ability to at least play that type of a position.
Absolutely, yeah. Now the big thing is that he's now left practice early twice with hamstring injuries. Yeah. So can he stay healthy? Is he okay? Especially hamstring injuries can get pesky if they get too far down the road. It's been tightness more than it has been like pulling up or anything like that, so that's probably good news. But the Saints are reacting to these soft tissue injuries very quickly, and so if you go and say, hey, my wrist hurts a little bit and I got a headache, you're off the field. You're done. And so I think that's probably what we're seeing with Kirk Merritt more than anything else. The other guy is Ellis Merriweather, the undrafted free agent out of UMass, and he's a little bit more of a Latavius Murray type, right? Big body guy, can run between the tackles, got enough speed to get to the outside as well, and he's been working as a pass catcher, but not super, it's not really his skill set in particular. But he's also got, moments where at the front corner of the end zone, he's catching one-handed touchdowns and 7-on-7s and things like that, so we can't count him out there either. So I think it just kind of depends. If you're looking for what would effectively be a third running back for the first 3 games that can come in while Alvin Kamara is suspended, not counting against a 53-man roster, do you want the pass-catching back that can also help you in the run game, or do you want the running back who can help you in the passing game a little bit? And so it just kind of depends upon where you want to go there, but they have a little bit of talent there. Wouldn't be surprised if they continue to investigate other opportunities, though. A guy like J.D. McKissick, for instance, would make a ton of sense for them.
That's a great point. All right, let's talk defense. Let's start with the defensive line. Start with the defensive ends. We know Cam Jordan is penciled in, put in there with marks a lot. Passanio has played well for this team this last couple of years. It's on the other side. It's Granderson, it's Turner, it's Foskey. What are you seeing?
Seeing a lot of Granderson and a lot of Turner. I mean, both those guys are performing extremely well all throughout camp. Last year, Peyton Turner's camp was flashy. He had a moment day 1, moment day 3, moment day 5, that kind of a cadence. This year, it's every day we're writing down 98, which is a big departure from last season. And Peyton Turner observed that in himself last year. He said, I feel like my camp is really flashy. I just want it to be more, I want to become more consistent. This year I asked him, last year you said your camp was flashy. How would you describe your camp this year? He said consistent. So I think that he's achieving that goal. And that's great for New Orleans because that's a first-round guy that they invested in a couple years ago.
Everybody pretty much gave up on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Myself included, by the way.
Yeah, and I think with evidence, right? I mean, you've seen him struggle with injuries and things like that. And just, I think that injuries just kind of hit different a little bit here in New Orleans because you've seen the way that the injuries have impacted the team over the past couple of years. And so when you see a guy that's consistently getting injured, it just means a little something different here, I think, for the fan base. And so I think you're seeing him be healthy, seeing him available, seeing him out on the field in shape, athletic, long, doing all the things that he does. It's awesome. It's really, really good to see. Like just from a personal standpoint of wanting to see a guy succeed, he's there. And I think that him and Carl Granderson are pushing each other quite a bit. Carl Granderson has gotten a lot of praise throughout camp, and deservedly so. He's a guy that started off in the NFL to, I think DA says 237, and I think is probably what was written on sheets of paper at Wyoming was probably 250 something, and so he was somewhere in that range starting off, but now he's in his 280s, and he's just as athletic as ever. He's come along as a run defender, big time. He's one of the Saints' best run defenders last year, opposite Cam Jordan, and really I think maybe either just ahead or just behind Cam Jordan. The two were virtually similar in the run game on either side. So I think maybe it's safe to consider Carl Granderson maybe the front runner for right now, but the Saints aren't ready to make that decision yet because of how good Peyton Turner has performed. Isaiah Foskey's coming along. He's got a long way to go, but there's no rush to get him there.
Not at this point.
As a second-round draft pick that's toolsy, that has everything, and they're teaching him a new position. They've kind of moved him into this 4-eye pass rushing, which is instead of him lining up outside the tackle, he's lining up on the inside shoulder of the tackle. It's a bit more of a run-stopping position, run prevention position. So that's what we're watching him do right now, is learn an entirely new position. I would equate it to an outside cornerback learning the slot position for the same time. It's like that. And so it's not surprising that he hasn't, we're not writing down 55 as much, but it's not because he isn't performing. He's learning something new, and they're taking their time with him.
Saunders, Shepard come in, Malcolm Roach returns, they draft Brzee. Talk about the interior of the defensive line. If this team cannot stop the run, they're going to be in trouble.
It's been surprising to me how good the defensive interior has been so quickly in New Orleans. And I give Colin Saunders a lot of credit for that. He would probably hate that I'm giving him credit for it because he's not that kind of guy, but I'm giving him a lot of credit for it. He has become such a unifier of that position group in the same way that Cam is a unifier of the edge rushers. That's the kind of role that Colin has filled.
That's a good deal.
And it's awesome. And he's got championship pedigree, championship experience, all this other stuff. I think that factors in too. And so I think that Colin Saunders, much like Brian Brzee, both these guys get the same compliment. At their size, I can't believe they move that well. And that's the big thing, is how athletic they are. And then you have the athleticism of a Malcolm Roach, which he's always had since Baton Rouge, and Texas and all the other places that he spent time. Nathan Shepard, his brand is athleticism, right? He's kind of the most immediate replacement to David Onyemata that the Saints have going in. And I've been surprised pleasantly. Oh, and Jack Heflin, even a guy that's coming in from the Houston Roughnecks, who has made some plays. And so, I don't want to leave anybody out of the conversation, but those four guys at the top in particular have been a really, really good response to the sort of exodus that took place at that position group. So I'm pretty high on that position group right now, and I give Todd Grantham, the new defensive line coach, a lot of credit too, because what he's doing is that he's coaching them to operate as a unit, but he's coaching them to succeed with their individual characteristics. And so, oh, you're really good with this type of move or this set of moves, let's help you build on that. Oh, you're really great in sort of the finesse approach versus the power approach, let's help you build on that. Power to speed conversion, or speed to power conversion more likely, okay, let's work on building that. So I really love the approach that he's given these guys.
Linebacker position has been an issue because of injuries. We got Demario Davis right now with a calf injury. We've seen Pete Werner unable to stay healthy. Zach Bond has been utilized, I believe, in the wrong way. Again, he's a pass rusher that came out of Wisconsin. They want to make him as a Sam linebacker. There are some guys behind them. Jackson, the draft pick, Sewell, Nick Anderson from Tulane. They brought in Barr, Anthony Barr, the former Viking, the former Cowboy. He leaves without signing a contract. Today they're working out Jalen Smith, the former Cowboy. Talk about the linebacker position. Starters, depth.
Yeah, so your starters, if we go three deep at starter, Demario Davis is your guy, right? He's your communication headset. He's your Mike linebacker. He's getting everybody set up. Pete Werner is your top will linebacker, a weak side linebacker, dropping a little bit more into coverage, doing things that are a little bit more sideline to sideline. Both of these guys, even though they would be considered off-ball linebackers or coverage linebackers, their first responsibility is always to run in the second level, things like that. So it's not removing them from the run game at all. It's just that their specialties allow them to be coverage linebackers as well. The third linebacker, in terms of the third guy, if there's a third linebacker on the field with those two guys right now, is Zach Bond, still playing that strong side role, but doing a lot more on-ball work. A lot more run defense, a lot more pass rushing. Like, those are things that you're seeing
which
a lot more
do,
for,
right?
Which he does pretty well. Yeah, he does that better than he covers.
No doubt.
And I think that's where you want to see him. So now the question is, who's the guy at off-ball behind Demario Davis and Pete Werner? And Dennis Allen said just this week, we're trying to figure out, quote, we're trying to figure out who the off-ball linebacker is behind Demario Davis and Pete Werner. We don't have that answer yet. So it's kind of a shot across the bow when it came to some of these other guys, which, look, I'm all about that style of coaching. Like, let players know when they're not rising to the occasion, and that there's an occasion to rise to, which I think is the other piece of it. So DeMarco Jackson's been a guy that they've worked in. He's the draft pick from last year, App State. Didn't get a rookie season because of a preseason injury. That's still undisclosed in terms of what that injury was, but Doesn't seem to be any concern about a re-injury or anything like that there. They've been working him, even though he played a lot more of an on-ball linebacker role at App State, he's been getting the work as a middle linebacker, calling the shots, making the calls, making the adjustments, things like that, and playing coverage. And he's improving, but he's not there yet. I wouldn't call him your next off-ball linebacker.
So if Davis goes out, you don't want, again, you'd rather not have to come start Jackson in his place.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that that's why you're seeing a visit right now with Jalen Smith, who's a pretty solid off-ball coverage linebacker.
The last two guys they brought in, Barr and Smith, are not bad players.
Not bad at all. And I think Barr was probably a little bit more of a pass rusher, run stopper. I would put Jalen Smith a lot more in the coverage side. I mean, 6'2", 240, athletic, moves really well, played well for the Giants last year. I think didn't rush the passer a ton. I think he clocked only 8 total pressures last year, if I remember my numbers from Pro Football Focus correctly. But that was because they used him a lot in a coverage role, and I think that's what you would do here in New Orleans with him, should he sign, is have him be that off-ball linebacker, or at least start to challenge there to be that off-ball linebacker behind DeMario and Pete.
Viewer wants to know about Nick Anderson, how he's doing. Is there a chance he'll make this team, special teams, practice squad? What are you seeing?
If Nick Anderson is going to make the roster, it's because of all of the things that Nick Anderson is doing right. And this is where I think Nick Anderson separates a little bit, is that he's got the exact right mentality. He has walked in and said, okay, let me learn from Andrew Dowell before he went down with his injury. Let me learn from Zach Bond. Let me learn from these guys that have fought and earned roster spots, especially a guy like Andrew Dowell, who came as an undrafted free agent, just like Nick Anderson did. And so I think that it's all about special teams for him. He's showing you what he can do on defense, and of course there's value to that, but it's going to be special teams that's going to end up opening the door for him to be there. With Andrew Dowell being hurt and done for the season, there's a spot there for that special teams focused linebacker alongside Zach Bond. And so there's a chance for him there. I think he probably ends up starting the season as a practice squad member, and then maybe he sees some game day elevations and then works his way to the active roster. I think that's the trajectory that I see him on now, but we still have 3 preseason games and a couple weeks of training camp for him to prove more than that.
Sewell, Lord J, Summers, Connolly.
Yeah,
any keepers there?
I would highlight Sewell in that group, and I think Ty Summers too. You want to talk about somebody that's a core special teamer for you, alongside Andrew Dowell and Zach Bond.
Especially with Dowell going down, right?
Yeah. Ty Summers was a guy that contributed there when Andrew Dowell was healthy and when Zach Bond was healthy. So I think if you're looking for who fills your Caden Ellis special teamer role, that's where a guy like Ty Summers could potentially step in. So I like what he can do there. Nephi Sewell is probably the guy that I look at as maybe the one that no one's talking about enough in the off-ball role.
That's such great speed.
Really good speed, covers incredible. He covers really well. He's just undersized, and that's going to work against him against tight ends and things like that. There's no doubt about it. But he's got the tenacity for it. Very active in the run game. Sees, clicks, diagnoses very well in the run game. You're not going to get a ton from him as a pass rusher unless he comes off unblocked. But if he makes contact with a tight end or a running back or an offensive lineman, the offense is probably going to win that bout. But he's interesting, and he's going to be a lot of fun to watch over the course of the next few weeks to see how he develops as well.
All right, cornerback's interesting. You've got Paulson Adebo and Alante Taylor that are battling right now for the left cornerback spot. We know again Lattimore, right cornerback spot is etched in stone. Roby at the nickel back. If either Adebo or Taylor, one of those don't start, are they challenging for the nickel back? Talk about corners, where they are, and depth at that position.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start by saying Marshall Lattimore is playing outstanding football right now. Incredible, like all pro level football. And that's good because the Saints were, I think, 4-6 without him last year, those 10 games that he was out with the lacerated kidney. And that was such a freak injury in a way. It's not something that you walk into 2023 going, oh, is he still hampered by his lacerated kidney? No, he's probably past this now and everything. And so I do think that the top guy is the top guy. And that's good news for New Orleans because they struggled to get their secondary out last year. The starting 5 that was intended never played a single snap together. Paulson Adebo, I think, is in the lead, maybe a little comfortably, not super comfortably, but a little comfortably over Alante Taylor for that second cornerback spot, I would say. Maybe some folks would disagree there, but I think Paulson's ahead. He's been a little bit more consistent. He's been able to make the plays. He's been able to make the plays outside of just one-on-ones as well. He's making the plays in team drills and, navigating traffic really well and all these other things. So I think you just want to see him clean up the handsiness a little bit because he will get called for flags with that. But he's not the only one on the defense that's going to potentially fall into those penalties. Now, the tricky part is who starts in the slot for you, and where's Alontae Taylor in that conversation? My thing is, I don't know if Alontae Taylor is one of your best 11 defenders if you put him in the slot. He's one of your best 11 defenders if you get him on the outside. But he might not be that person in the slot. He's a fantastic outside corner.
He doesn't have the comfort level right now.
Doesn't have it yet. And it's understandable because he's been doing it for 4 weeks, 3 weeks, you know what I mean?
Agreed.
And then OTAs as well. We saw him do it a little bit, but I think he played, I think it was something around like 44 slot snaps his entire collegiate career with Tennessee. It's a whole new position for him. So just like we mentioned with Isaiah Foskey, it's not a knock against the player, it's just you're learning something new and that's going to take time. And so I don't think that you can comfortably go into the beginning of the 2023 season unless you see a massive leap for Alontae Taylor in the slot. Otherwise, you're looking at Bradley Roby, and I would even highlight Ugo Amadi as a guy that would potentially serve in the slot there. I know he's 5'9", but he don't play like it, and he plays incredibly well in that slot role, in addition to the other things he can do at safety. I know I jumped to safety a little bit there, but I think that he's probably maybe right now even ahead of Alontae Taylor in terms of slot depth at this point.
Depth at corner. What are some of the guys that might make this team at corner?
I really like what we've seen from Isaac Yiadom. I mean, he's somebody that's going to make the roster no matter what, as far as I'm concerned, because of his special teams acumen, but he has developed further and further and further as a defender. Something about this system works for him, works really, really well for him. And the coaching that he's getting from Dennis Allen and Joe Woods and Marcus Robertson, it's clear that he's comfortable in this system and that it's benefiting him. So I would highlight him. Troy Pride Jr. has made a couple of nice plays as well. He's somebody I could see making the roster. I think you also have to be looking at some of these undrafted free agents. Anthony Johnson has been kind of dealing with some injuries here and there, but has had some nice moments. Adrian Fry hasn't turned the corner yet. Will he? Will he not? And then you look at some of these other guys that might be able to contribute there. Lonnie Johnson Jr., for instance, is somebody that has that versatility. So I like where they are. They've got a lot of depth in that secondary, all told. But I think that you're watching guys probably earn roles through a lot of different avenues as opposed to just what they could do as a depth cornerback guy.
May and Matthew are your starters right now. When you look at who would back them up, who would it be?
I think right now Jordan Howden's that guy. I mean, Jordan Howden, it's interesting. At the beginning of camp, I would say that Jordan Howden looks like he's almost there. He just looked like he was in a situation where he needed to trust his instincts a little bit more and trust that he was right. There was one play where he's playing a deep safety look, and then we had they had Brian Edwards kind of crossing the field from the slot, from the right side of the field to the left side of the field. And Jordan Howden saw it developing in front of him, but was just one step too late of reacting to that and just kind of needed to trust what he was seeing develop. Now, he's trusting himself. He's moving a lot faster. He's clicking, he's closing, he's doing all these other things in the run game, so on and so forth. And so I think that he's just trusting his instincts a little bit more. And I know that's a big part of what Dennis Allen and Joe Woods and Marcus Robertson teach is go make a play. Go out there and do that. Otherwise, they'll show you, right? And this is one of the things that maybe is another thing that they've done differently. They sat the defense down and said, here's every missed opportunity for a turnover you had in 2023 or 2022 and watch through that tape. This could have been a top down punch down that you missed. This was a play to where if you would have gone under the route instead of over the route, trust your help, you would have had an interception. Things like that. And so I think that those things are translating well for a guy like Jordan Howden, who's coming in without the context of last season, but coming in being told freely, hey, go out and make a play. We've seen Tyrann Mathieu with some rest days. We've seen Marcus May with some rest days. In both cases, we've seen Jordan Howden lining up either across or beside either one of the guys that is available for that practice with the first team. So I really like what we're seeing there. Jonathan Abrams, a guy that's playing a little bit more in the box. Lonnie Johnson Jr. has made some big plays. He had an interception on the goal line in team drills just a couple days ago, and so he's showing you a little bit. Smoke Monday picked up his second interception on Thursday of camp, so you're seeing him kind of arrive as well. And I really love what we've seen from Ugo Amadi. So I feel really good about the safety spot. That's another spot like tight end, though, to where the cuts are going to be a little tough.
Got a minute left. Is it Lutz? Is it Gilligan as far as the specialist?
I think so far. I think maybe Lutz really solidified some stuff for himself this week. He's gone 17 of 17 over the last two practices as of the time that we're having this conversation, and 3 of them were game-winning field goals in simulation. Blake Gilligan's really just about arriving at the big moments and not having them come off the wrong side of the foot at the wrong time. But if he can do that, I think he's safe.
With 30 seconds left, will we see wholesale changes on the special teams, or pretty much similar to what we saw last year?
Pretty similar to what we've seen last year. I was actually noting the special teams units during today's practice, and people were wondering why I was doing that. This is exactly why. This is a place where you could see some big changes, and maybe a place where you see some new faces show up. But overall, Taysom, guys like Ty Summers, guys like Isaac Yiadom and JT Gray, those are still going to be your core special teamers that'll show up. Adam Prentice in that conversation as well.
Right, and of course we didn't mention Adam Prentice, probably your starting fullback as well.
I think so. Yeah, they bring in another fullback every now and then, but I think Adam Prentice is pretty safe.
We'll see how it goes. Big next few weeks, huge for this team. Again, practice against the Texans and the Chargers, and of course the starters getting some work here in the Dome on Sunday. Ross, thanks so much. Always good to have you. Look forward to our conversation every Thursday. Appreciate you jumping on the show today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
There he goes, Ross Jackson again. Locked On Saints podcast, Saints News, and also CrestCitySports.com. All right, so many ways to catch our program now. There's a QR code on your screen. It'll take you to WLAE-TV YouTube page or to my website, ericasher.com. And of course, pick out your favorite time slot. Set your DVR, because there's so many ways to catch our program now, and you'll never miss the show. Catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM. That is 4 to 6 weekdays. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app, our digital platforms, our podcasts on the Spotify, Apple, Anchor apps, and about all major podcasting platforms. And of course, we want to thank our underwriters who make this show possible. Each and every one of those underwriters. Please support our underwriters, and of course our folks here at WLAE-TV, which include Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, also Logan Graffia, Alex Chacon, Danielle Wick, and of course our fantastic director, William Hill. For Ross Jackson, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll see you next week.